Sup. My name is Coflo. Let's catch this ghost. Feeling it Friday! On this episode, we're going to be looking at a tune from one of my favorite producers out of Detroit, Scott Grooves. What up, Detroit? I love Scott's music, and one of the biggest reasons why I'm really about his music is that Detroit has a style. And I know there are a lot of different producers, a lot of talented DJs. Just in general, you can't lump Detroit all together and say there's a one-size-fits-all for what they produce in terms of house music. Not at all. I'm not trying to say that, but Scott is able to take something that I identify with when I hear Detroit house music, and he's able to carve his own lane for what he does sonically and what he feels is worthy of a project. Sometimes you get people that are really about simplicity. Sometimes you get people that are really about more of the musicianship, more musical. Sometimes you get stuff that's a little bit more raw. Sometimes you get stuff that's a little bit more polished. I like a lot of the grit and dirt that Detroit has in their sonic texture. And what I really enjoy about Detroit house music is that there is an originality to the style and the vibe, especially the groove. There's probably no better hub of production, at least in this country, that is able to do things with drum machines like in such a stylistic flavor. I just feel that vibe a lot from Detroit. Scott Grooves to me is like he's sitting up at one of the tops for me personally from a dance house music, like a dance track perspective. I love his stuff. I love his ideas. And he spans the gambit of like what those ideas could be, from really simple to like repetitive, infectious, to much more musical, doing covers of classic tunes like E2, E4. This particular track in question, Machinik, this is the tracks 8 through 17. He's done these projects where they're kind of like he's done these projects where they're more like beat tapes, and actually this particular one was sold as a cassette. I missed the window to purchase it, although to be honest, I've purchased cassettes and they like have just very little room in my collector's shelf at this point. But if you're into collecting cassettes, this is the kind of guy that'll have a 45 in one project, a cassette in another, a 12-inch in another, digital for those who don't have the means in some cases. You can pick up this tune digitally. The tune that we're looking at is number 14. So this is Machinik number 14. And I might be saying that completely wrong, but I'm like saying it like I have some Deutschland vibes to throw around in my horrible English American accent. Let's get to the brass tacks of the song. You're going to be able to find it on his Bandcamp with the rest of the project. There's a lot of hot grooves in this project. I think the reason why this song sticks out is not because there's anything musically brilliant that takes me on some journey. Rather, it gets back to the raw of what my dance craves. And a lot of the times it's repetition with deep meaning. And that's something that's really hard to create in a extended repetition inside of a house tune or a dance track, because repetition, although is the heart and soul of kind of what creates that rhythmic groove, it's also what creates monotonous, kind of boring, like cycle of if there's not enough change, you just get bored as fuck. This song nails the groove and the sonic idea in such an interesting way that I'm able to listen to it for longer periods of time. And there are small changes. There are little syncopated surprises. Really dope stuff. But it is, at its core, is just it's a fairly repetitive kind of loop of this sequence. And for whatever reason, it skips past that little section in your brain that goes, fuck, this is super repetitive and boring, it doesn't change enough, and it goes straight into the other part of your brain where movement is inspired and creativity comes from in your dance, and it grabs a hold of that bitch and it pulls it out and makes you just get lost in the sauce. You really, you know, it's like one of those songs that you listen to it loud enough with the lights low enough and you can catch the ghost in something that is seemingly only, you know, a dozen, 16, maybe 24 bars in terms of its overall change, musical compositional change, and it just works. Let's go ahead and listen to the first so many seconds of the song, and you'll get an instant feeling for what that groove is and that drum pattern and that sequencing, just in general, the sequencing that's being used in this song, and you'll see what I mean. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at some of the other surprises. There you have it. You have this really interesting sequence, very, very low and heavy. Like the sonic landscape of that is really way down here in the bottom of the sonic palette. So you don't have a lot going on up top. And what I mean by top is like bassy, low, mid frequencies versus high end, shiny, sibilancy frequencies. And the cool thing about that is since you don't have a lot going on, you have a lot going on down low, not a lot going on up top, the contrast is stark. And it works really well because there is just enough space in the low end that you, even though it all kind of sits down in this low area, you hear all the ideas that are there. Even though they're busy and there's a lot of them, you hear all of them clearly. And there's a grit to it. It's not like this, and you know, surrounding ethereal, you can wrap your head in a three-dimensional space. It's like straight out in front of you. You're looking at it right there in front. There's no sneak attack. It's all right there in front of you. You hear all of it. And the contrast is so stark between that hi-hat on the offbeat that it cuts through like a cliche ass saying, a hot knife through butter. This is the fundamental groove. The bass line is just there when it needs to be there. It's not a constant dragging thing. It's something that's there for a few moments, a few notes, and again, it's just low enough, just different enough to where you hear it from all the other sequences all the other sequenced ideas taking place in the other low-end Tommy kick kind of like sounds that are going on in that drum pattern. As we move on in the song, we then start to hear the main idea, which is kind of like the lead singer in the project, where it's this melodic sequence that's arpeggiating and kind of bouncing around, has a bit of filter on it that we hear throughout the song open up a little bit more, so you hear a bit more of the upper texture or idea of what that sound is, and then some of that kind of gets carved off. To me, it has a bit of reflection on it, so it has more dimension than what we're hearing with the drum sequence and the bass and the hi-hat type of thing. Like, it gets a little bit more of a sonic character to where it's, to me, it's not just like one sound, but it's two sounds, even though it's really, again, something that's kind of just right in front of you. And it is the whole factor at which groove is like, we went from grooving fundamental to now we have another kind of like bouncing idea that, again, like when you're catching the ghost and you're kind of in the zone, it's so nice to be able to see these things clearly in the mind's eye and to be able to create movement where you're not stuck just on a 4 on the floor pattern, or you're not stuck just on a 2/4 backbeat snare or clap or whatever. This song like forces you to look at, to see visually in your creative eye with what you're doing in your dance. It forces you to see these things differently and to explore the movement differently. Check us out. You hear a little, you hear in that melodic sound, so you hear in that sequence what I mean by like, there's a bit more reflection in what that sound is. It's not just, it has a little bit more three-dimensional space than the rest of what's going on in the track. So it has the necessity, not only the fact that it's melodic, but it has the necessity because of its sound design to be a little bit standoutish. Also, you hear moments of where that filter kind of opens up and you get a little bit more of that sonic texture and it kind of reveals itself. It's almost like it's dancing behind a shadow or a curtain and you see a bit of its shadow, but you can tell what it is. And then for a moment, it kind of like pulls back the curtain and then puts it back. And you hear a bit more of the metallic idea of what that sound is. And it goes from like kind of a muted bell sound to like more of a metallic FM sounding kind of grit, and then instantly back. So it's like it's tamed the whole time, where you're not unleashing the beast, which I think is pretty cool. I mean, I as a producer, like I really sometimes want to just make things super abrasive and like shocking and really just focused. And you know, I'd probably sit there with that filter open or whatever it is that's allowing that sound to morph and to change, modulating, whatever it is. Anyways, it's fucking dope. You also hear, it's interesting to call out, you also hear these syncopated ideas of like, kind of like a snare with noise, or sometimes kind of a hat. There's some different pitches in what those are, and they just come in out of nowhere. Doo-doom, 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 doo-doom. Like these things that are just like these really interesting surprises, where that to me is like house music's version of jazz, where you have these like moments that are improvised almost in the way that the repetition is arranged and composed, and it's these moments of surprises that feel improvised even though they're usually sequenced or whatever, or maybe they're just he hits a pad on his drum machine or whatever. But it's like it's an interesting thing to have. And from a dance perspective, that's those things that give you guitar face, that make you go sour and go, ooh, what was that? Like it just feels really good. And because there's so much space between these surprises, and they do have timbre qualities that different from surprise to surprise, and they change a bit in their pitch a little bit, and it's just enough of all little things that really poke out, and super tasteful, considering again this song is riding for like 4 or 5 minutes with just this groove, and that's what it is. Let's listen to another section, another little piece, get a vibe for it, and that's pretty much it. You're listening to the whole thing, and I could talk a lot about what seemingly to most people I think is very little, but that's because that's how much I appreciate this kind of idea in this style of music. And as you can see, there's other little surprises, little open hat surprise. Again, stark contrast, minimal, to kind of keep you on your toes. We were listening to probably close to the last 30 seconds or so right there. And you can hear how there's some arrangement changes to minimalize the sequence that you hear. So you're hearing less tracks. You're hearing the main melodic sequence being segmented, turned on and off, or muted unmuted, to where you're not hearing all of the notes in the sequence. Again, adding a bit of jazz, like a bit of syncopated character. Super cool. That was Machinik 14 by Scott Grooves. Link is down below for your Bandcamp goodness. Go check out a bunch of his projects. There's so much dope shit that this man does that when I play records for people in my lame DJ style, when I'm playing for people, that people are like, "What is this madness?" If that's the vibe that I'm on and it's Scott Grooves, like, folks usually have no idea. And Scott, I don't know if he intentionally makes music for dancers, but a lot of his tracks are so dance forward thinking that yeah, my hat's off to you, bro. Fucking amazing. So yeah, go check him out. Support. He's got so much good music on Bandcamp. Don't sleep. Do some digging. Spend the time to get to know the catalog of these artists. Don't be lazy and just wait for someone to hit you with a top 10. Be lazy and wait for me to publish another Feelin' It Fridays. I'll see you next week. If you're feeling this, drop me a comment, throw me a like. Let me know what you're feeling so I can check out some new tunes. I'll catch you on the next Feelin' It Fridays. Peace.
Feelin'.